Joining us now on the John Fredericks Radio Network is the former ambassador to Qatar for the United States and a career foreign service diplomat for the country, is former Ambassador Patrick Theros. Ambassador, great to have you with us.
Good to be here, John. Glad to talk to you.
Now, Mr. Ambassador, I want to go right to the Gulf and Iran. And I want to start with the tankers that were attacked and the UAE saying that it was Iranian or Iranian agents. My history with UAE media, and I said this before you came on, I don't believe anything they say that comes out of the Emirates, because you go over there, you read their state-run papers, it's like, Ambassador, it's like reading The Onion. I mean, they just make up stuff. So I'm very suspect anything that comes out of them, coupled with the fact, okay, let me get this straight. The UAE, their annual trade right now, last year with Tehran, $2.1 billion, that's with a B, $2.1 billion. It's their biggest trading partner on the globe is UAE. Why would Iran be attacking their tankers? What is going on here?
Part of it is you got to remember that the UAE is a confederation of 7 different emirates. The 2 most important are Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Dubai and Abu Dhabi have always competed in the past for leadership. Dubai gets its money from trade. Abu Dhabi gets its money from oil. Dubai is the beneficiary almost exclusively of the trade with Iran. So there is nothing, but the political power now rests after the crisis in 2008. All the political power rests in Abu Dhabi. If Abu Dhabi can in some way or other screw over, if you'll pardon the undiplomatic statement, Dubai, it reduces them as a power competition in the region. It makes Dubai as dependent on Abu Dhabi as the other Emirates, which are all, because they don't have oil, are all pretty poor. It makes them as dependent on Abu Dhabi, excuse me. So if you look at the UAE as a whole, you have a lot to lose by causing a crisis with Iran. If you look at the internal struggle between Abu Dhabi, where the capital is, and Dubai, which is like Washington and New York, and Dubai, where all the transit money is, then it makes more sense. And by the way, that $2.5 billion in trade is only the trade that comes into or out of Iran from the Emirates or into the Emirates out of Iran. It doesn't take it doesn't count several more billions of dollars of trade of goods that move from Iran to Dubai and then get distributed to other parts of the world, which is probably 2 or 3 times larger. So Dubai's economy is very much dependent on Iran, even more dependent now after the break with Qatar, because Dubai's second biggest transit customer was Qatar, and they've lost all that trade. So this is a good way to bring Dubai to heel. It is also, separately from that, the Abu Dhabi regime has grand plans on becoming the most powerful state in the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula, and part of that is building up, is being able to put Iran back on its back feet, getting UAE control of the Straits of Hormuz instead of the Iranians controlling them. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why, even though on the face of it, it doesn't look logical, in fact, there's a great deal of advantage to the UAE in doing this. It also distracts Saudi Arabia, because in the long run, the relationship between the UAE and Saudi Arabia is a relationship of convenience. These are states that have a long history of competing with each other, and this is a way of, I think, embroiling the Saudis in something that they don't understand how to get out of afterwards.
So was this...
That's a sort of a long-winded answer. My apologies for that.
No, it's a great answer. It's a great answer. We're with Ambassador Patrick Theros, former ambassador, U.S. ambassador to the state of Qatar, and he's now a senior advisor to the Gulf International Forum. So is this another example, and and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I always do, and you're always so gracious. Is this another example of Mohammed bin Zayed, MBZ, or really running circles around his younger, somewhat incompetent counterpart, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, where basically MBZ is pulling the strings and Mohammed bin Salman and the Saudis are sifting in the wind as they've done a number of times, with Yemen being one of them. Is this just another example of MBZ basically getting the upper hand here?
I might use the language somewhat differently, but yeah, sort of, in the sense that I think MBZ has a very clear and well thought out idea of where he wants to go. And the Saudis and MBS is floundering a bit, so he is able to. If one guy knows where he wants to go and the other guy isn't sure, the guy who knows where he wants to go always have an advantage and can always lead people.
Ambassador, Mr. Ambassador, let's talk about the U.S. response and the typical military complexers and warmongers beating the drums. I said earlier I was just dumbfounded, Mr. Ambassador, by Tom Cotton's comment, who I like, a Republican conservative senator, Arkansas. I like him on a lot of issues, immigration being one. And he says, it's a matter of us dropping 2 bombs there in Iran and we're out and it's over. And I had to read that 3 times, saying to myself, he couldn't have said this. Haven't they learned anything from all this, from Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and ISIS? Haven't they learned anything at all?
You would think. I mean, that statement actually makes about as little sense as anything. I don't know much about Tom Cotton's other politics, but I'll tell you, that is dumb. It's straight up, simply dumb. This is a country that's 4 times the area of Iraq, or 3 times the area of Iraq, twice the population, a much more sophisticated population, a population that is much more nationalistic and patriotic, and unlike Iraq, actually has the ability to hurt us in half a dozen places. Iraq basically had no friends. Iraq had no influence in neighboring countries. So when we invaded in 2003, it was us against the Iraqis without their having any ability to hurt us anyplace else. They fired some missiles at Israel trying to drag the Israelis in. It didn't work. These guys, the Iranians, have a whole huge smorgasbord table of things they can do to hit back and hurt us. They can really tear us apart in Afghanistan. They can do the same thing in Iraq. And, and if we made an all-out war, and this is where I think the Saudis and the UAE are playing with fire, the Iranians have the ability not to close the Straits of Hormuz. They can probably close it for a few days, but the U.S. Navy has the power to force its way back in. What the Iranians really can do is destroy the export capacity of Saudi Arabia. The Iranians, through the years, have been buying a relatively old and unsophisticated anti-ship cruise missile from the Chinese, have large warheads. And, firing them at an American warship, you'd have to fire 20 or 30 to get through. But all they have to do is fire them at all the Saudi offshore platforms. You get 1,000 pounds of high explosive hitting an offshore platform, and it's smoke. They've also, they can fire them into the export facilities. They can fire them into the, the other thing they have is about 500 or 600 fast patrol boats that are designed to carry commandos. They could send them across the Gulf. Most of them aren't going to come back, but I'll tell you, these are crack troops, and they can destroy the ability of Saudi Arabia to export oil from or any place. I think they can also do it to the UAE, not to the degree because the UAE targets are further away. They can do it to the UAE, but they can actually wreck Saudi Arabia's ability to export oil. That's going to take 9 million barrels a day off in a week off the world market, and it'll take them 5 years to rebuild it. So, we can go to war, and, we can probably, if we're willing to pay the price, destroy half of Iran. But, we destroyed 9/10 of North Vietnam. It didn't do any good.
Well, then what? I mean, that's when you look at go to war. Yes, I guess you could take out in the short term their nuclear capabilities or whatever it is that Tom Cotton and the other warmongers in there are talking about. But then what? I mean, what will you then do? Occupy a country that size? I mean, where would you go from there?
You have to start the draft up again in the United States.
Unbelievable.
There's no way, and no one's going to go with us. If you think people bailed on us in 2003 in Iraq, let me tell you how many people are going to bail on us now.
Mm-hmm. And why would that be?
Because they don't think we have a case. The Iraq invasion destroyed our credibility anyway. So no one believes us, and actually there's no evidence that we've managed to present. I was just there, not in the UAE, I was next door in Qatar, and when we heard about the explosions off Fujairah port, of the 4 ships, I did sort of an informal poll among my friends as to who do you think did it. And it was sort of funny, the response. The first response was, it was the Iranians sending a secret message to the UAE not to push this too far because they could hurt them. The second response, which was actually slightly the larger one, was it was the UAE doing it to itself because in order to provoke the U.S., in order to build a case, because people noted that none of the ships was seriously damaged. There were the fire brigade, so to speak, the floating fire brigade was on the spot within a very short time, and there were no casualties on any of the ships. And this is an area that's further away from Iran. Remember, this is on the Arabian Sea, which is around the corner from the Straits of Hormuz and pretty far down. So it isn't something close to Iran, and the UAE had ample ability. The third candidate were the Houthi rebels in Yemen, but the thing about the Houthis is they wouldn't have kept them secret. They would want to show the UAE, make sure it can do it. There were a few people thought it was the CIA, and I said, no, man, we're way past that one. And then somebody came up, maybe it's aliens practicing on some weapon. So, but I'd say the majority opinion in Qatar at the time was that the UAE had set this up on its own, specifically to try and stampede the Americans into doing something.
See, neither of us are conspiratorial theorists, right?
Yeah.
But
right.
Presented with what you just did, if I had to wager, if I had to pick and bet $100 on which of those were true, I would take the UAE did it to themselves, because you're right. It was strategic. No one was hurt. And all of a sudden now they're getting the result, which is we're running around talking about war. Now, the Iranians did reposition their missiles. I asked I asked former ambassador and the other day about this. Why would they have repositioned those missiles, though?
2 reasons. One is they're planning something. 2 is they think we're planning something.
Right.
So this can go, it literally can be interpreted both ways. And if I were a sensible military force and I'm dealing with a great power that has a lot of naval assets that is beginning to make threatening noises the way John Bolton does, first thing I would do is repossession weaponry for 2 reasons. One, to improve my defenses, and secondly, to send a message to that great power saying, it's going to cost you.
Look,
so repositioning weapons makes a lot of sense, even without. It makes a lot of sense even without trying to find some reason for it, some dangerous reason for it. I mean, first thing is, one of the reasons you reposition is you complicate the other guy's targeting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you move your missiles around, the biggest problem we had in the 1991 war with the Iraqi missiles being shot at Israel is the Iraqis had the missiles on the in big tractor trailers, 18-wheelers, posing as 18-wheelers, and they just kept moving them around. We had long-range patrols in there. We had reconnaissance airplanes flying over it all the time, and the Iraqis just kept playing this, this game. What's it called? Where you move these cups around. There's a stone.
Right.
There's a pea under it. And we never
Monty.
actually hit one of these missiles
Monty.
on the ground.
Right. Now, you're right. And those were the Scud missiles, right? That they had.
Yeah, the Scud.
They were just.
And those are big, and
they were moving around on trucks.
Yeah.
What though? We're with Ambassador Patrick Theros, former ambassador to Qatar, also senior advisor of the Gulf International Forum. What does this mean for the Gulf?
I think 90% of the people who live there are hoping this will blow over. For them, it is terrifying. The disruption, the possible disruption in their lives and their economies, getting people killed, is just horrific for them. And nobody thinks that this can have a good ending unless the two sides find a way to back down. And as much as we make, what's the word I'm looking for? As much as we make this sort of a point of honor, and we begin to hold extreme positions, and this applies to both sides, it becomes more and more difficult because the president can't be seen as backing down, and the Iranian leadership can't be seen as backing down. The Iranian leadership has managed to convince its population that it's all America's fault. So if you back down, it makes them really look bad. There are the economic conditions, the fact the country's got high unemployment and so forth. And the president's got elections in 2020, and the Democrats will use a back down against him. Not that they're in favor of war, but who cares? It's politics.
What is the role here for Qatar to play in this? Because they've got the largest U.S. base sitting right there. I mean, obviously, if there is a conflict, that's going to be the first thing targeted by these missiles, and those are going to go right into Qatar and probably into Doha as well. So what is their role? What is Qatar's role in this conflict?
It's really hard. The Qataris have given us virtually complete free use of the base at El Udeid. And in the past, they have honored this agreement completely. So they don't have any way of, they must be jawboning us at the moment, saying, oh, come on, don't do this. And I'm sure they're out all over with talking to all their friends to try and jawbone us into doing it. And the Qataris do have their own speaking terms with the Iranians, and they're probably sending the same message. But this thing has now grown beyond them. Their ability to actually hold this together, I think, is far more limited than it is on other subjects.
So they really don't have the opportunity right now to play the mediator, right? I mean, it's gotten bigger than that. Maybe they could have done that.
No, we're past that. I mean, it's very hard to play the mediator with the elephants.
Right. Yes, no, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to ask you this question, and then we're going to be out of time. Ambassador Theros, if you were giving advice right now to President Trump, and he's his own man, he makes his own decision, doesn't matter what John Bolton says, he takes his opinion, but he's going to make his own mind up. What would, as a former ambassador to Qatar, career in the Foreign Service in the Gulf, you know the area so well, what would be your advice to the president in this situation right now?
Publicly fire John Bolton and blame it all on him.
That would be certainly one way to do it. And why do you think it's Bolton's?
Because that way, I'm being very cynical.
Right.
Politics is a very cynical world right now.
Right.
It is very, I personally believe the president made a mistake in allowing John Bolton to run this. I remember Richard Nixon. I'm old enough to remember vividly Watergate. If Richard Nixon had called a press conference a week after the story came out and said, ladies and gentlemen, I just discovered I've got 4 idiots on my staff, and I'm sorry about it, and I fired them. There would have been no Watergate.
That's right. You're right. And we all go back to that. We all remember it. And had he fired them all and said, look, they went out half-cocked on their own, and I'm appalled by the whole thing. They're all fired. There'd have been no Watergate. And you're exactly right. Look, history shows whenever John Bolton gets a hold of something, it immediately escalates, as we're seeing now. But that is good advice. Unfortunately, Mr. Ambassador, I could talk to you all day, but I'm out of time. Fascinating insights, sir. Thank you, Ambassador Patrick Theros, former ambassador to Qatar, and now senior advisor to the Gulf International Forum. Sir, thanks for being with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.